Hello. It is an 11 a.m. and I'm joined with Chrissie today. Thank you for everyone who is joining at the moment. I'm sure we'll get a few people who kind of join at midway through as well. I'm speaking with the lovely Chrissie today. I'm very, very happy to have her join me because obviously, she experiences a lot of kind of recruitment stuff that comes up, i.e. sort of interview guidance, CV guidance, stuff like that. We thought it would be a really good idea just to collaborate on this, on some of our frequently asked questions that we get as recruiters, both internal and external, because they come up quite a lot. I don't know if it would be just useful, Chrissie, to just give an intro on kind of yourself, your background, and how you've kind of ended up in your current position.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Anna. Really excited to chat with you. So for anyone that doesn't know who I am, my name's Chrissie. I, at the moment, am a global talent partner for a company called Owkin, a biotech company. I did a bachelor's in biology starting back at the beginning, but I hated the lab. So that was me out of there. And I've actually found myself within scientific recruitment. So I spent the last 5 or so years, so 2 years doing the agency side of things like yourself. And then the last sort of 3 years in-house working with small or medium growing biotech companies, normally supporting their R&D and or medical kind of teams. So yeah, this AI, ML kind of space is really important for the R&D teams within those organizations.
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. So I guess it would be interesting to know where people are joining from today, from our side. I think what we're going to talk about, generally speaking, is applicable to pretty much anywhere in the world. So yeah, if you could just kind of run through who you are, where you're joining from in the world, just so we know roughly what to expect. And like I said, if you're just joining now, me and Chrissie are going to be discussing the AI landscape in particular. I guess what we're saying, I don't know if you agree, Chrissie, will actually transcend across tech. But of course, you know, we both work I primarily work in AI, and I know Chrissie does a lot of work in the sort of AI space and AI recruitment at her current role and previous roles. So she definitely has a lot of food for thought. Awesome. So I guess we can maybe start kicking off with some of the questions. Me and Chrissie discussed just some points where we've said, okay, we get a lot of questions, a lot of messages about this on LinkedIn. So I jotted down some questions to ask Chrissie, and I'll obviously jump in as well. And then, you know, feel free to ask questions throughout, but we'll definitely kind of go through a lot of the main questions at the end, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A at the end, if that's all good for you, Chrissie, as well.
Yeah, sounds wonderful.
Amazing. Okay, cool. So my number one question, Chrissie, in your experience as a talent acquisition lead, what are the key elements that make a CV stand out when evaluating candidates? So when you get that influx of CVs, I'm sure you do get, what kind of is making a CV stand out to you? Just for people who are like, oh, I want to get my name out there, I want to kind of get recognized, what would you say works best for you?
Yeah, so just to put it into perspective, what you, Anna, I'm sure, as well as me, have to deal with, you know, we can have hundreds of new CVs every week. So as much time as we can want to dedicate to reading every single word on a CV is just not applicable. So you do get a feel for a good CV, and you do open up 1 or 2 of them and go, oh, that's going to take me a minute to just get used to. So I suppose the first thing I'd say is, I know that nobody enjoys writing a CV. So I know that I've been in that situation. So it's just about learning what's going to work for you. But my biggest tip, please do not leave off your best achievement, your most fantastical thing that you've done, the best award that you've won. Don't leave it off your CV thinking, when I get the interview, I'm going to mention that and I'm going to like stand out. It's going to be something new. Don't. You need your CV to get you to that interview. When you're in that first interview, that second interview, that third interview, you can again remind them of this fantastical fact, but don't leave your best achievement off. Like it's not doing you any service. So that's my top tip that I tend to give. Also, I think it's really important to use white space. I think it's good to really frame what you're writing because you need good content, you need good wording, you need good descriptions about what you have done, the responsibilities that you've done in a role, the technologies you've used. But I want to see white space. I want to be able to clearly go, where's your education? Where's your work experience? Where's your publications list? So really wisely try and use that white space to almost frame those sections. And the idea is that your CV is going to get the conversation started. It's not supposed to answer all of the questions, just supposed to answer the majority of them. You must see it as well, Anna, that if you open up a CV that just has no white space, you end up not reading much of it at all because it's just lost.
Yeah, I think there is something definitely to be said with a CV it's framed in a really neat and kind of aesthetic way. And I think sometimes we think, okay, let me just throw in everything because I've done so much. I want to share everything. And it is good to share that, like Chrissie says, those real strong achievements, get them in your CV. There is absolutely no point kind of waiting for an interview because that interview might not come if you don't share it. So definitely do that. But I think you've just got to come from a perspective not of a tech professional, but from a perspective of maybe someone who isn't a tech recruit, a tech professional. What are you going to simplify a little bit just to make it easier for a different eye? Because often it's not going through your hiring manager, it's actually going through like a HR professional, a talent acquisition individual, maybe an external recruiter before it gets to that person, and you still need to get picked off and think, okay, I need that person to recognize what I'm doing. So yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, out of who's joined today, do you think that's something that you're already doing? And I've just seen, Mikhail, you said, but adding publications could make it more than 2 pages. In that case, just from what you're saying there, maybe your top 3 or 4, 5 publications, could you maybe put like a hyperlink to the rest of your publication list, so then you can still see it if you choose to go on it, but you're not making that CV too long to a point where you think, okay, who's still reading by page 5? So
no, exactly. I would say 2 pages of good content and maybe a 3rd page of your publications, or like you say, with the links and just the titles, because the biotech companies that I've worked for, they always have that research element. So those published papers are really key. Like, don't leave them off. They do make the difference between people getting an interview, not getting an interview, getting the job, not getting the job, because they want to see that you're actively publishing in this industry. But put them at the end, order them by first author, by second author, hyperlink them up. So do involve them, but just really spread things out. Also, something that I see people missing off of their CV all the time is a really impactful personal statement. This is used in so many ways. I've used it as a recruiter to convince hiring managers that they should see somebody as a summary of this person's abilities and skills. It's your CV, so you are the best person to summarize who you are and what you've done. So just include it at the top. The idea of a CV is that, unfortunately, you need to convince all of us to keep reading down. So I need to be enthralled at this top bit and go, oh, actually, yeah, that sounds really great. Let me keep reading and find out a few more answers and a few more questions as well going along the way. So there's plenty of sort of help out there and suggestions and templates about writing impactful personal statements. And I'd almost say that this is the bit that you should most definitely personalize per job that you're sending it to. What is going to matter to the company that you're just applying for? What's going to matter to Owkin? What's going to matter to Helix? What's going to matter to each company? And change that personal statement. The rest of your CV might not change that much because you've used the technologies that you've used. You've had the responsibilities that you've had. But this bit at the beginning, this personal statement, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I agree too. It's that kind of first thing to convince, it's that first thing you see to make a decision, yes or no. And it still does hold value, I think, because we work with tech professionals who have done incredible work. I mean, I speak to a lot of, machine learning engineers, scientists who have done insane projects that you just think, how on earth have you done that? So it's definitely powerful to see the sort of tools you've used, the tech stack you've used, kind of the methodology about it. But I still want to see a bit more of a, insight into who you are in a short impact statement, like you said, because you can't just forget about the soft skills as well as the tech you've been working with, because that it's not just a tech robot walking into the job, it's still a person, and those things really do count, and they are valuable. So yeah, totally. I mean, it's really exciting. And while we've been talking, I've seen that people are joining from all across the world, which is really exciting. So thank you for everyone who's joining. It's me and Chrissie today speaking about the AI landscape and hiring and talent acquisition in this field, hopefully sharing some useful tips. And we are going to potentially move on to the next question now. We'll definitely answer any questions we haven't thought of right at the end and throughout. So feel free to ask alongside while we're speaking. I mean, could you share some tips, Chrissie, on how candidates can effectively showcase their AI expertise? So, I mean, we did speak about, putting everything clearly into almost boxes to make it really readable and user-friendly. But in terms of AI, if you're hiring for a role like this, what do you look out for on a CV? How do you kind of notice what they've done in the AI world?
So I would really strongly encourage people to practice the art of concisely summarizing a project. It's really hard to do when you've been involved in that project and you know all of the details, you know all of the data, you know all of the turns and the successes and the tribulations, but save that for when you're explaining it to a person. Don't try and write all of that down. So literally try and write 1 or 2 lines about the project that you've done. And I personally find it really useful if you can cement that, if you can weigh it down against the company that you did it at. I think it gives it a lot of context. It can help you imagine this person. What did they achieve at this business? What did they achieve in this role? How have they grown? The projects, maybe the scope of the projects, how have they changed over their career? So I find it really useful to make sense of, if you can attach it under your actual work experience, the company where you've achieved that project. Yes, just nice and concise. And it's about including the key pieces of information. So for me, when I'm looking at a CV, I'm interested to know the sort of data that you've worked with on that project, because working in the biotech space, you can really stand out if you have already worked with healthcare data, whether that's images for an image role, omics, multimodal data sets. Tell me briefly what sort of data you were working with. I want to know the rough goal, the rough aim of your project. What were you kind of looking to achieve or hopefully did achieve? And then name some blanket terminology for the techniques, the technologies that you used to achieve that. Was it supervised ML? Was it federated learning? Give me a little bit of a tick box exercise there of I'm using these technical skills that you've asked for on the job description.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. I mean, one thing I would suggest, and I know ChatGPT is kind of consumed the world at this point, but I am a bit of a, I will say about 20 things in order to make one point, because I'm kind of rambling a bit, and I know that's something I do. So it can be super useful actually to use that, not to write something out. I feel like that's where it goes wrong, because it becomes very unauthentic and disgenuine. I feel like maybe using it to say, okay, I'm writing this, can you make this more concise for me? And often using a tool like that can kind of cut down all the words that you don't maybe need and make it shorter and make it more impactful, like you've said, using something like that. I mean, I've used it within some of the messages that I've sent, just to make it a bit more reader friendly. That could be a good
use the tools, like you say, that are there. Use these things to help you write stuff down when you are a bit too close to home. Get people to read your CV. If you are able to openly share that you're looking for a job, share it with your colleagues or with your past colleagues if that's safer, and say, would you understand what I have done? Share it with those people who are not within your industry. Like you said earlier, it's about the audience that you're writing your CV for. You need it to make sense to a non-technical individual. You need enough of the kind of high terminology to interest those individuals, to make it clear what you're doing. But it is going to be read by your manager, by your new manager, by the head of department. It's going to be read by the technical experts as well. So that's why it's worth trying out sometimes, people reading it and seeing if those concise explanations kind of intrigue people. That's what it should do. So I'd say the best way to showcase your projects is writing it under the job where you've achieved that. However, I have thought of a couple of other options that me and the hiring team at my companies have always looked at. So GitHub can be a really useful tool. Now, I would just put a word of caution here. You get to choose what you put on your CV. You don't have to put your GitHub link. If your GitHub does not show off what you can do, what you're capable of, if you can't put your projects on GitHub, which you quite often can't in industry, right? If you from when you were like 20 or, when you were just starting out and you were just doing basic fun stuff, don't put it on there, because somebody's going to click on there. A hiring manager is going to go on and be like, oh, I wonder what so-and-so can do. Oh, they're doing this. Like, if it shows you off, if it sells you, put it on. If it doesn't, leave it off.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also, if you haven't used it for maybe 3 to 4 years, something like that, I wouldn't put it on, because it just looks as though, even though the likelihood is you're working on machine learning projects, computer vision projects, Python programming projects, and you are putting them on, you can't put them on there, but you're doing them, it might look as though actually they're not really doing any personal projects. Are they that interested in the work outside of their role? Although you probably are doing that, or you're doing a lot within your current role, it just doesn't give the best impression. So I would say, just if it's really up to date and really fresh, then again, it's kind of more useful there. We did just get a question. I don't know what your thoughts are, Chrissie, on the question. Very exciting. Do you need to indicate all your achievements for the various job roles in your CV? I mean, you go ahead. I would probably say not all of your achievements, but you go ahead.
I very much agree with you, Anna, there. No, don't put every single thing you did. Tailor it to the company you're applying for. Look at that job description. See what skills, what past experiences they're asking you to evidence. And if you've done them, if you've genuinely done them, then include them under that job. Again, it's about balancing out the amount of words you've got on that page. So don't write down the things that are not relevant, not interesting, or you've outgrown. We all have to start at a beginning situation where we do maybe more basic kind of tasks. And that's really great at that stage to get you to the next stage, like your qualifications. GCSEs get you to the A levels, which gets you all the way to uni. So don't worry. It's definitely about going through and trimming that every time you're upgrading your CV, every time you're applying somewhere else. So totally agree with you, Anna. Don't put everything unless it's really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Henry's asked that he's an established product data scientist, but also doing part-time PhD. Oh, that's awesome. How do I make the jump into doing AI for my job? Does it matter that I haven't completed my PhD when applying? I guess my thought is no, but I don't think it is the be all and end all that you haven't finished your PhD. My only concern, if I was a hiring manager, is how much are you going to be doing a part-time role, a full-time role? What would your sort of balance of time look like for the position that you're applying for? I know that a lot of people I speak to actually do their part-time PhD on the weekend, so it doesn't really kind of make a difference as to when they work permanent, what sort of role they would do. But I would just make it super clear in your CV, if you can, on what the timescales would be like, just to make it as clear as possible, and where you are in that process. So if it was in 2020 you started, you know, ultimately, when are you looking to kind of put your thesis in and all that sort of stuff, just so that the company can kind of get to grips with your own timescales. But Chrissie, what would you say on that question for Henry?
Yeah, I think it's a really nice transition to make, and also nice that you have chosen a route which you've gained those data scientist skills, and now you're applying it to the clinical space, which would be really interesting for a company like Owkin. And I saw that you applied, so I'll go and check that application out. I would say, so I have had candidates before who then start a full-time role in a really fast-growing biotech company, who are then finishing their PhD or a qualification. It could be a different qualification as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about understanding during the interview process how much time and just capacity the role is going to take from you, because PhD is no mean feat. You know, people spend 4 years full time doing it for a reason. It's a really hard thing to do,
totally.
And it's worth doing well. You know, you can only do it once, so you just want to do it properly. So just make sure that if you are interviewing, like you said, you're clear about timelines, because if you're near the end, it's different to if you're at the beginning. Clear about how much time you will realistically need, not optimistically, but actually realistically need to complete it. And if you've got the capacity to do that, and it's no bad reflection, if you actually decide, I'm going to concentrate and do this PhD, I'm gaining some really great skills in the clinical space, applying that AI, I'm going to be amazing for this company once I've finished. So just kind of consider whether now is the right time or whether you should wait. And that's down to personal preference, right? About, capacity and your current job situation as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think that I mean, that's helpful for me to even to know. So hopefully that's also useful for you, Henry. I'm just going to get back to the questions, and we will definitely keep answering the questions that come up too. What are the common mistakes or pitfalls that candidates should avoid when preparing their CVs for AI roles? I've got an answer for this, but I guess, I'll kick off. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Chrissie, because I don't think we've spoken about many things. I don't know if this is a one thing we may have not discussed in knowing you, but the hobby section of a CV, I can understand the sort of, okay, this is me as a human being, and I do like that element. I don't know if it needs a certain section. So for example, me saying, you know, role model is Roy Keane, support Aston Villa, you know, all these things. I don't know if I need like a certain section for this, or if I could just integrate that into one of the sections, just, you know, throughout, kind of give a little taste of who I am as a person. I that's something that I think just is a bit of a space waster, I guess. But I don't know what your thoughts are on. It's just because I've actually had that today, and I've just thought, is that still a relevant thing to do? But I mean, you might have a completely different opinion.
I think it's a really hard one. I don't think there's an obvious right or wrong. So the reasons for leaving it on, but if you do leave it on, don't give it much space, because, you know, the idea of a CV is that you can actually, you're assessing someone's technical abilities, and then the interview process is normally about assessing someone's cultural fit, which includes your who you are as a person, the softer skills, right?
Yes.
So small space. The reason for leaving it on there is it can make someone curious, or it can help you to establish those relationships to start with. So you and I, Anna, are chatty people. During my interviews, I love to get out a little bit of my candidates, who they are, what they did at the weekend, what they did in the evening, how their work has been, just a little bit about them as well, you know, and I'll share my side. And yesterday I had an interview where somebody said, oh yeah, no, I was salsa dancing at the weekend, and I love to salsa dance. So that was a real like moment of like, wow, this person's interesting to me, and they stood out. But that's also, that came up during a conversation. It wasn't on their CV, and I still saw them. So I think if you are struggling to put enough down on your CV, again, reminding ourselves about the importance of white space and the framing, is you could leave it off. It's not, you're definitely going to succeed in an interview process if you don't have it on there.
Yeah.
Is it going to make you more likely to succeed? I don't think it will help you pass the interview process. It's just, it might save you having to volunteer that information in an interview.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Yeah, it's the long kind of established thing, isn't it? And it's just whether we still do it or if we don't. But I think there's no right call on it. I think if you're going to do it and you like to do it, just don't make it War and Peace. Just try and make it quite succinct.
Yeah, and if it's like, I like to read, I like to listen to music, like that's not helpful. I don't know what you're reading. I don't know what you're listening to.
Totally.
That's not doing the job of that section. I just think every other section has more priority than that. So if for any reason you have too much space, maybe consider putting some more technical skills in there. But if you still think that you want to put something down, then you can, it wouldn't stop you getting a job.
No, I don't think so as well. Cool.
I had a few more...
No, go ahead. You go ahead. Yeah.
Common mistakes. Really obvious one, but like bad spelling or bad grammar. Just because we have so many like software and things that can help us out. And so the current company that I'm in, Owkin, we work across Europe. So our working language is English, but we know that that's not everybody's first language. All of the interview processes are done in English, so you need to have a working level, a professional level of English. But I do get English has horrible grammatical rules. You know, like English is my first language and I still make errors. So I really sympathize with people whose language is not their first. But we have so much software out there and so many tools that can help you to not make really obvious spelling mistakes or using the wrong version of there, or, you know, something glaringly obvious like that. Just because when you're comparing hundreds of CVs, you have to find small things that are going to be like, I'd choose this person over this person. And grammar and spelling, unfortunately, you can do. So just because you can stop it, get people to check it, get the software to check it, just try your hardest not to.
Yeah, okay. And I think, I mean, a common one that I use is Grammarly, and that's really helped me. Just even with kind of how I'm, like, I will write down how I'm thinking it, and I will be like, okay, cool, on to the next thing. Even with my LinkedIn post, sometimes I will post it and then I'll think, oh my goodness, what on earth is that sentence structure? So everyone does it, but the key is you can't edit a CV once it's sent. So is it worth just getting a colleague, a friend, or just using a software installation like that, where it can just, you know, avoid you from going back on that CV and going, oh my gosh, you know?
Exactly. It just because we are looking for such small details, this is something that you can work on. The last thing I'll say in terms of common mistakes is when personalization goes wrong. So when I'm at Owkin and I get a message being like, dear AstraZeneca, I want to apply for this role.
Yeah.
I completely understand that normally if you're looking for a role, you're not just going to apply to one company. Obviously, I do always recommend to people that they don't get to that stage where they're desperate to leave an organization before they apply, because I think you make bad decisions. But we aren't always lucky. You know, I've been made redundant in my career, so you're not always in control of when you apply for roles.
Yeah, 100%.
If you're going to personalize it, do it properly. Take that extra 5 minutes to just make sure you're sending it to the right place with the right name, or just leave it off. Like, I don't mind if it doesn't say dear Owkin, dear Chrissie, like, I don't mind. So just either do it well or don't do it.
I agree. And I would say, if it's a LinkedIn message to you, I feel like we say, hey, hi, Chrissie. Hi, hey, Chrissie. Hello, Chrissie. Just because, you know, you're not a company. And just a small detail like that would even throw me off a little bit, where I'm like, I'm not the company itself. But I think that's really helpful. And I'm glad we went back to that, because actually I think that's something that could definitely help A lot of people just, that extra, I think a lot of what we're saying here, that extra 5 minutes makes a very big difference.
It does.
And I know time is of the essence. We're all under deadlines. We're all under family situations and lots of different scenarios. But if you're not that fussed about an application, don't make it. If you're really, because even if you are in a situation where you do need a job, I would say having skills in machine learning, AI, data, even generally tech, they're in demand. So you know that you're an in-demand candidate most of the time. Pick something you want to do, because it will show throughout that interview process. You can't fake that, I don't think.
You also can't teach it, right? So a soft skill that every company loves to know is that you are enthusiastic about the prospect of working for them.
Yes.
I'm not saying play it up, just show however you show enthusiasm. For me, that is quite over the top because that's who I am. But if that's not me, that's okay. Even just to label that emotion if you're not going to be able to express it on a camera because maybe you're nervous or that's not who you are, but just in an answer that you give, label that you're enthusiastic, you're motivated. I know that quite often we will ask, why have you applied to work at this company? But don't wait for that question. Shoehorn it into an answer.
Yes, totally. And just, obviously we're talking about, CVs, interviews, we're talking about the whole process, but just moving into that, asking questions is so important. You don't need to ask 20 questions at the end of an interview. No one has that much time. But, asking one question like, oh, okay, why do you like working for the company? And then being like, no more questions. I would want to see a bit more engagement, a bit more enthusiasm than that. Even when, hiring into my team, I like people to really go into a little bit more food for thought. And okay, so what was the reason you initially joined? What is the most exciting project you're currently working on? That's helpful for you because you're going to have to make a decision if you've got multiple offers about whether that's going to be right for you, and you actually get a first-hand perspective of that person's kind of experience at that company. But also you're just showing the right qualities, the right sort of engagement, enthusiasm from your perspective. So it's a win-win. I still get feedback, and even as I don't want to over prep candidates going to an interview process because ultimately if they're not right, they're going to get found out whether they're hired or not.
Sure. Yeah.
But I always say, ask questions, find that this is an opportunity for you to find out more as much as it's for them to find out about you. And sometimes I get that feedback, they didn't really show they were interested, they didn't ask many questions. That's a killer for me because I'm like, oh, that's the easiest part for me, for asking those questions rather than answering technical questions that I would have thought, gosh, that's actually really tough. So
absolutely. I do say to my candidates, because I speak to them at the very beginning of the process and I'm really their guide throughout the rest of the process. I'm their kind of common factor when they're going through the interview process and meeting other people. I say, ask the questions you need so that hopefully when we do give you an offer, what you are saying yes or no to. What do you actually need to know? Do you need to know the finance of the business? Do you need to know if there are such things as summer working hours, how the work-life balance is? Ask if they do the games night that you love at your current business, and ask these questions throughout the process. Maybe you've got one or two questions that you want to repeat in each interview. I think that's absolutely fine, because so long as there is a question that shows that you are starting to imagine yourself in the role in the company, I think it's so valuable. An interview process is two-sided. You as a candidate finding out if you want that role, what that role is, and us as a business learning about you and if you're going to fit into the skills gap, but also the culture we have. So questions is the best way to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think just on a slightly different note, but in the same vein, I've had female candidates wait right until the offer stage to say, oh, can I find out about the maternity leave? I might, and they say, I'm not actually even thinking about it now, but I do see a long-term future at this company. It's something I would like to know. And I just think that is so, so sad for me, almost heartbreaking that, you don't feel as though you're able to ask that throughout an interview process because you feel as though that might kind of change your chances of getting that role. I would say I wouldn't want to work with any clients or companies that have that perspective anyway. That's something, as much as I'm an agency and I work for an agency, I work with multiple organizations. I do genuinely really, value the companies I work with, and I work with them for a reason. So I think, that's not a taboo question, especially anymore, just because we can have children.
For any parents, whether your mum, dad, or you're going to be main carer, or adopted leave, or there are so many scenarios that people can enter into, but these policies 100%. Make a difference. That's why businesses spend so much time. This is why HR teams work so hard to do the best policies that they can, because they care for their staff. And it is a differentiating factor when it comes to accepting offers. So if you want to know that information, just ask it whenever you have it, especially to your main talent person who's going to see you through the process, because your manager might not know it off the top of their head. Ask them, but they might not know it. But if you ask me, I'll either know it or I know how to find it quite quickly, because I am quite closely aligned to HR. So these are definitely the questions. The same as, it's not just about base salary, it's about all of the compensation that a company can offer you. And it's really okay to ask about that, upfront and early, because that is going to be part of your payback, isn't it? Is all of that. And
totally.
Maternity cover, paternity cover, parental cover is definitely a part of that. So you're not going to be judged for those questions. And like you say, if you are, maybe it's a sign of if you do or don't want to be there.
Agreed. And if you're uncomfortable asking those questions and you want the answers, but you think, okay, I'd actually rather ask a TA or a, recruitment consultant or a HR professional, have that chat with them initially or whenever, or request a chat with them. And honestly, the amount of, HR professionals I've worked with who are like, oh my gosh, awesome, I really want to speak about this, because often tech is really male heavy, male dominant. The people I've been like, okay, can we have a chat about this? They're like, absolutely, I can't wait to speak about this. I don't get enough opportunity to speak about this. So, it's just an example, but I guess, if you feel it's too taboo and you still feel like, oh, I just don't feel comfortable, that's our jobs, essentially, like the likes of me and Chrissie, we can talk about those things and give you insight.
That's one of the, we are the people to ask, right? It is the TA, the agency you're applying through. So it's direct to ask somebody like me. And agency, there are so many benefits as well of applying through agency, that you can have these extra discussions on the side or everything else. So just use your connections, use your route in to ask these questions, so that you know what you're saying yes or no to at the end of the process.
1,000,000%. Awesome. We'll do maybe a couple more questions, Chrissie, if you're happy to do that, and then maybe we could do a few questions from people who are joining. So would it be a good idea to include projects that are relevant to the job description and role?
I think definitely first prioritize those ones. Make sure they are on there. If you have something that you're really proud of, other additional skills, and you have space, you can definitely add them on as well. But you should be prioritizing these skills that are mentioned on the job description, or that people at the business use. What do you think, Anna?
Agreed. And I think where we can, if you are applying to 2 or 3 different types of roles, it will take, again, that extra 5 minutes to slightly personalize that CV. I mean, I just had a conversation with a candidate where we're applying to 2 very different opportunities, but equally interested in both. And we said, okay, could it be worth bringing up more of your research achievements right at the top of your CV, just to really highlight those. And then for the other role, we'll show more of kind of, your experience with the sort of finance sector. And then we can add the research in, just to really highlight, just shuffle things around. It does make a difference. So totally I agree with what you're saying. And I do think it would be worth doing, Ali. So hopefully that helps.
One thing extra, Anna, sorry. What I want to make sure people realize is how a CV is read. It's not necessarily read from top to bottom. I won't necessarily read things in the order. So this is why I need things to be where I expect them to be. So I want to see these relevant skills under your work experience in the context of, the projects, the concise explanations. I also want to see these skills in a skills section, so that no matter which order I'm reading things in, or if I'm cutting out sections, I'm still going to find the answer. So make sure it's on there.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, Emmanuel. How important is it to have software development skills for AI roles, or is there a separation between developers and the model designing? Do you want to go ahead, Chrissie?
Yeah, how it's worked in the smaller biotechs that I've worked at tends to be two separate teams. So tends to be like a research R&D team, and then also developers team as well. So the job description should make it really clear if they are asking for somebody who has both of those skills, or if they want one or the other. And so I would really let your job description lead you in what skills you want to put down. If you're kind of considering which career to go into, I would say, again, use job descriptions as your source. I use job descriptions as a tool to progress my career. I look at aspiring jobs that I'd love to be able to do one day and say, what skills do I need on there? So again, you can use that as your opportunity here to say, what kind of jobs am I interested in at these companies? What are they looking for? And maybe tailor your career choices that way. What do you think, Anna?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's all about the JD and saying, okay, so I can see from this role, it's got a really strong modeling and productionization component for this ML engineering role, for example. Where is my relevant experience? It's not to say don't add your kind of design or your development experience in there, but it's just about kind of wording it, maybe using, again, I can't stop talking about ChatGPT today, but maybe using that to say, okay, can you kind of in this prioritize these sorts of elements of my paragraph right at the top? And it will do that for you. You can have a look, shuffle it around, because again, let's not just copy and paste. It's just going to look crazy and it just won't be authentic. And lazy, absolutely. But yeah, I just think it's about kind of really relying on that tool. Again, speaking to maybe your network and saying, okay, I can see that you're a senior ML engineer and it looks like the sort of role I would like to do. Would you be able to have a quick look at my CV and just see whether you think it's worded in the right way? Because they'll be on their way to maybe becoming a hiring manager or someone who is looking at CVs. And in that case, could they give you a really, first-hand viewpoint and perspective of how that's reading? But yeah, I just think it's about, like you said, Chrissie, really relying on that source and not kind of letting it go over your head.
Just quickly, I think you made a really good point there, Anna, of leaning into your network. This is something that I learned when I was made redundant, is actually I was not utilizing my network enough previously. So if you genuinely know people at the company you're applying to, let them know. There are quite often referral schemes, help your friend out. It can be helpful. Yeah, it's just really helpful to lean into your network and ask, whether that is saying, can you please go over my CV? Because you are the sort of person that might look over it if you know this person. I think we should be helping each other out like this. And us, TA recruitment specialists do this all day, but other people have exposure as well. So, and they might have more, they might or they might not have more time to do this or understand where you're coming from. So lean into your network, whether you've got TAs that you've worked with before, or you've got people, old bosses maybe, or someone like that that you can just reach out to. Like just ask. People will say no if they can't, but you don't know if you don't ask.
Yeah, they genuinely will. I would definitely say the industry is very honest. And if people don't have time, they won't do it. So if you ask a couple of people, the chances are someone's going to come back and say, yeah, no, absolutely, I'll do it. And then you have an extra viewpoint. Okay, cool. Samuel, we'll answer your question, and then maybe we'll jump back to some of the questions I prepped on. So I have experience in back-end engineering, DevOps, and some product management. That's crazy. Been busy. I'm looking at a move into machine learning engineering. Are there any courses, types of portfolio, or certificates that perform well getting interviews for a sideways move? I mean, I have a few thoughts on this, just I guess from a top level perspective. I would say be very careful if you are going to do courses on what you choose to do and whether they are going to be well valued in industry. I would ask, again, people who have moved into that industry or talent acquisition, generally your network, like we're saying, just lean into that, because they will be quite honest with you in terms of actually, no, that's not very well regarded. And it's a lot of money to do these courses. And that can be a real pain for me when I see people, dishing out the cash for all of these courses when maybe how much are you really learning, how much value are you getting from them. So I'd be super careful on that. There are, on another note, really great courses that you can do. I would say doing stuff like hackathons could be a different point of view, and just really showcasing where you're throwing yourself into that industry. I would say that's something I really love to see on a CV in the sort of achievements section. And personal projects, I think, are also a really good sort of edge to showing that I'm passionate about this. This is what I want to do. Putting maybe your top 3 most relevant / most highly regarded personal projects that you've worked on in your CV, and showing that, although I'm a software engineer right now, I do this outside of my spare time. For those who are more junior in their career, and I appreciate this cannot work for everyone because, everyone has different situations on the go. Internships are something I think that people need to kind of try and go for more and really see the value in. It does, not cost a company a huge amount, but it does still cost a company to do that. What they get in return is a different perspective, a different viewpoint. And so there are things that they do get, but I think if you're really committed to getting in the industry and you are able to do an internship in industry, I would say go for it, because you actually might get a permanent role out of it, first of all. But I think from my hiring managers that I work with, they love the certifications, they love the courses, they love the academic studies, but they do actually like to see a bit of hands-on industry experience. So if you can squeeze that in there, that would be great as well. So that would be my advice, Samuel.
I think you've touched on many a good point there, absolutely. And there is the hands-on experience that people want to see evidence of. So yeah, during those hackathons, if you do link up with the right courses that are worth your time and your money, they may well have relationships with industry to put you into internships or to connect you to companies who are more likely to have capacity to take the risk, because that's what you look like on a piece of paper. Also, it's good to just briefly on your CV explain why you're making the transition, which skills you want to keep that you've learned from that time that you've invested in your other roles, and also why you want to make the transition. Because I get that a lot from hiring managers when they see a switch, they're like, oh, why did they do that? And they just want to understand why. So again, being aware of the white space and not overcrowding things, but just a reason for leaving, or my inspiration was in your personal statement, maybe connecting the 2 dates up as well. That can be really valuable. But yeah, it's the hands-on experience, so the hackathons, the internships, the personal projects, your GitHub, all of that kind of thing like that. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Anna.
Definitely. There was a question that I really wanted to ask you, Chrissie, because I thought your perspective could be very interesting on this, because, I do interviews myself, but I think as an interviewer working for that company, it can actually kind of bring up some different knowledge points. So in your experience, what are some red flags or warning signs during an interview that can indicate a candidate may not possess the necessary skills or knowledge?
Yes. So we always like to question any red flags that we see and just make sure it's not down to personal bias or circumstances, because I know that all of our computers know when we have an important call to do and they're not going to log you on time. Someone's going to knock on your door. And yeah, all of these things can happen, and being human and not all of these things on their own is a red flag. But I think some of the things that are a red flag to me is if somebody is obviously reading the answers.
Yeah.
We can definitely use the advantages that we have of doing video interviews, right? I definitely am here today. I've got pieces of paper around me. I've got information that I wanted to share written around me, and nobody can see that. So use it to your advantage, but don't lie. That's what it comes down to, is if you're reading the answer and you're not confident of the answer, you shouldn't be imagining or showing it off to be your own. So yeah, we had an example of that a couple of weeks ago here, actually, and that was a red flag for us.
Of course, yeah.
Also, being overly negative about past experiences. Again, I know that we're all humans. We all get on with people to varying degrees, and some places maybe it was a very toxic work culture, but just being mindful about the terminology we're using, the time we spend on that point, because interviews, we've got many questions to get through. It's not necessarily a therapy session, so just being mindful of the time you spend on that, and owning any part of it that you might have done as well. And the last one I'll put is a lack of enthusiasm. We touched upon it earlier on today about that motivation. You can't teach that. We want somebody to have that. So if you are looking really fed up, grumpy, checking your clock all the time, just generally not making me feel like you want to be on this half an hour, 45-minute call that you've booked in my diary because supposedly you want a job, it's going to make me question, what are you going to be like when you're not on your best behavior in an interview?
Yeah, totally. That's a really good point. And I just wanted to touch on that because I think it can be, you're so insular and you can feel the pressure and you can build yourself up to an interview to a point where you kind of lose that sort of almost rational thought, I would say, to an extent, where you're like, oh, I'm just going to go on a tangent about this. It's good to remind yourself, look, I might have had a really, tough end to my role, if you were made redundant or, certain situations like that where you feel like maybe it was unfair or whatever the case is. But the interview's kind of there to kind of, not brush upon that too much, but this is a new opportunity. So take the positive in talking about a new opportunity, take the light and great things that you learned, acquired throughout that last opportunity. And of course you can share, I was unfortunately made redundant. I really loved that role. I learned all these things though. And I'm really excited about this next step in my career, putting the shining light in almost what you did there without telling untruths, I think will always play to your advantage a lot more.
It's a human thing, right? Like, it's just nice to hear about nice things. So yeah, don't lie, don't gloss over the difficult points, because that's got you to this application. That's an important part of your motivation, is that you don't want that replicated, or but yeah, try as much as possible to just frame it in I learned this from that experience. I don't want to be part of that experience again. So now what I'm doing instead is actually this, or this. So just try and frame the learning opportunities you've had out of that. Personally, I also just like to think of it like that anyway, right? Because it's nicer to kind of rationalize and deal with in our own heads, and not dwell on the negativity. But I know that's not always easy to do.
We are humans ultimately. But yeah, that makes sense. Should we go for maybe 2 more questions from people who have written in? I'm aware we don't want to make this too long, but we do want to squeeze in as much helpful advice as we can. So I don't know if there were any other questions from Alexandra. If you are a graduate with not a lot of industry experience put on your CV, how important is it to include or not include extracurricular activities, i.e. personal projects, leadership, volunteer roles? Or should my CV focus on being more concise to include just my academics and experience in machine learning / AI? Chrissie, do you have any thoughts just to kick this off from Alexandra?
Yeah. I would say great question, and a lot of people have had to make this transition, right? The academic qualifications in the companies that I've been in have always been well regarded, so it's time well used. It's nice to put down and get certificates for the hard work that you've done, and to recognize that. So good use of your time. I would say that the companies you should be applying to, you should be able to see on LinkedIn that they've already got a lot of people who have these kind of qualifications that you've got, which indicates they are used to people making this transition from academia into industry, and that they understand the transition and the skills that you have to learn along the way. So first of all, just see if you're going to be in a good space, if they're going to understand what you're doing. Practical tips on what to include on your CV: put down your personal projects, use your GitHub. I always like to see the majority of it be about your professional skills, the projects you've done. I don't want to read half a page of the really great outside life that you've got and your hobbies. I want to learn that about you when I speak to you. On a piece of paper, I want to read some of the hard-hitting tick boxes that from the job description. So if those extracurricular activities and personal projects tick those boxes, put them on there. And you can have a section about your leadership and volunteer stuff, because that's how you choose to use your time. But I'd say try and focus on what you can offer the company in terms of skills. What do you think?
Yeah, no, totally. And I think there is something to say. I was going to ask a question. I know we can't ask all of them, but about collaboration and teamwork as an example. If your volunteer leadership, those roles include like those sorts of elements, and that is something that you're seeing on the job spec, and we want someone who's really collaborative or agile, or those sorts of skills on the soft skill element, I think pop it in there, because it is relevant. And I appreciate when you're an experienced engineer, scientist, researcher, it's a lot easier to fill out that CV. And sometimes when you haven't got as much experience, you think, oh God, what, I need to cram something else in there to make it look a little bit longer. But I would still, in that vein, focus a little bit more on the technical work that you've done, because that's the role that you're going to do. So it's all about kind of having a balance to what you're doing, and finding the relevant points that you should include, like Chrissie said as well. So I agree on that too.
Companies should have realistic expectations, knowing the level that you are at or what you've just done in order. They're not going to expect you to be able to fill out a whole CV with all of your technical skills. Like, that's not, if they're the jobs you're applying for, then it might not be right. So just put down what you have done.
Okay, and the final question. It feels like we've only been here 5 minutes, or nearly an hour. So that's classic us, Chrissie. Hi, I have graduated with a master's in AI. It has been a shift from electronics engineering to AI. Awesome. So I've got publications in electronics, but not AI. What can I do to get my first job in AI while highlighting my projects? Thank you. Thanks for the question.
I can go first if you want.
Yeah, that would be great.
So there's a lot of value in people who have changed industry or changed careers, you might call this, if you've come from electronics engineering, electrical engineering to AI. So first of all, the time you spent doing that is really well spent. You've gained some really good skills, qualifications. You've obviously done some great work if you've done publications. So you've obviously know how projects work. So be proud of the fact that you are transitioning to a different space. So I know I mentioned it earlier, but I'll try and include in your personal statement your motivation about why you want to move to a slightly different sector, whether that's personal, you just think it's really exciting, motivating, you think you can do better in this industry. Include that somewhere, maybe in a couple of places, so that, like we said, if I don't read the whole thing, I get the story. Then I think it's about trying to prove your hands-on experience already. So doing those personal projects, trying to do those hackathons like we mentioned, it is about showing that you've actually thought about it and can do some of this new role. And then you will need time to pick up on some of the other skills, but that you've got the essential basics. So try and do some personal projects if you've got capacity to do that. Try and link up with communities like talent communities and things like that are going to support you in doing this, and also make sure that you are leaning into those talent communities and asking questions and asking for recommendations from those that have done it themselves.
Yeah, totally. I would definitely agree with that. And I would say, again, internships could be a really good opportunity there. If you've just graduated with your master's, if you're struggling to find a permanent role, which I know can actually really commonly happen, which is a shame because you think, I've got this really cool degree, I'm ready to jump into a role. If you are struggling to find that role, I think an internship is a really good move there, where you are acquiring industry experience. It's that extra kind of bow to put onto your CV. I've actually already started within the industry on an internship with this company, and this is the work I'm doing, this is what I'm developing, this is what tools I'm working with in an industry setting. That's what I would say if it was me in that situation, because that is incredibly valuable for a company, and it will set you apart from maybe those in a very similar position to yourself. And especially as AI gets more and more popular, like we're seeing at the moment, you just want to set yourself apart. And it could be that kind of move where you are slightly more early in your career, where you can afford to do that. And that is an assumption that might not always be the case, but just something I would consider.
Just an extra thing I thought of actually while you were giving that great advice. I wonder if, as a student, you get free entry to a lot of the conferences or things like that. So if you're going
subsidized,
so depending where you are in the country, but it could be an idea to try and attend some of these conferences in the area that you're interested in. That way, it's not just your CV; it's actually you as a person that's then making the introduction. You can ask if they are supportive, if they have internships, if they know of others who have internships. You're making that personal connection. So I wouldn't go along with the paper copy of your CV if you're wanting to work in AI. It looks a bit old school, but definitely go along asking for email addresses, who you should contact, what jobs they have coming up. Like, ask those questions if you can get along to these events where the right people are going to be.
Yeah, I agree. And just go for it, I would say, because I go to those conferences. I've been to one recently and I really had to, it's very easy to be confident maybe on here, but actually I sometimes don't feel that confident, and I can feel like that feeling in my stomach when I'm about to go up to someone like, oh my gosh, are they just going to turn me away or not want to speak to me? Realistically, if someone was coming up to you and was wanting to find out more about your company and just showing that engagement and interest, I would love it. So just go for it. I get really nervous as well going up to people and talking to them, but genuinely it could be the difference in you getting a really cool opportunity somehow, or potentially not. So just go for it.
Something I was going to mention that hasn't come up, which could be relevant for when you're introducing yourself, is the power that an elevator pitch has. So the idea that you literally, you get an elevator, you have literally a couple of floors with the person you need to speak to, and you need to introduce yourself, your motivations, why they should speak back to you. If you have a very short elevator pitch, use it for your interviews, your introductions at every stage of your interview. Use it when you're meeting new people as well, at these conferences perhaps, or wherever. And it's just something that you can fall back on. If you've done the work already, it may even go to form this impactful personal statement that we've mentioned several times now, which is really useful on your CV. But this is not time wasted. Like, your elevator pitch goes with you as your career progresses. You're going to change things, but it's always useful in case someone turns around and is like, oh, can you introduce yourself, please? Then you've got something to start with. So that can sometimes help with nerves, right? Because you know what you're going to say.
Yeah, that's a really great piece of advice. So get writing those up, everyone, because that can just definitely help with the nerves, like you said. Okay, cool. So I feel like we've gone a little bit over the time limit now. What I will say is me and Chrissie may jump on something similar again if there are loads of unanswered questions, because I know we're really both passionate about kind of making the space more diverse, inclusive, and generally having more equity in this space. So anything we can do just to kind of share some insight from our perspective, I know we're really keen to do that. So we may do that again, but yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Chrissie for joining me today. She is a very busy woman. So actually this time that she's cut out of her day to help is, you know, really, really valuable and has been valuable to me as well. So thank you so much. Pop her a connection request on LinkedIn. And I'm sure, you know, if she has some time, I know she gets a lot of questions on LinkedIn, but she'll try and get back to you, I'm sure. But like I said, we may kind of do something similar again because it seems like there's still questions and I'd love to answer them at some point. And yeah, you know, if anyone is looking for a new role or kind of looking to make some hires in this space, this is something I specialize in as well. So would be more than happy to discuss details on that as well. Perfect. So Chrissie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure as always. You're the best.
Really fun. I'm glad. I hope that we've helped a few people along the way, and those questions have been really useful, right, to make this session just fit for purpose so that you and I can help people. So yeah, if anyone needs I definitely recommend yourself, Anna. If anyone needs an agency, if they're looking and Owkin isn't the right place to go, then yeah, just speak to Anna. She and her team are amazing, so they're going to help you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Perfect. Well, everyone have a great afternoon if you're in the UK. And yeah, we will touch base soon. Thanks so much.
Take care, everyone. Nice to see you.
Bye, everyone.